last class period, we went over multiple intelligence theory, so that would have been the big picture item for the week. And then we talked about the different types of intelligence. What modes of learning would be most important if you were learning something new? So we talked about that in terms of making cordage. So even if the activities in this class are not related to primitive fire, at least these examples will give you an idea of how activities relate to the theory. So if I'm learning a new activity, I want to see it visually, spatially. Then I want to hear about like some of the main important items of this activity, what to do, what not to do, common mistakes, and descriptions of what the person's actually doing when they perform the skill or the activity itself. So those are my big three. Now, that may be different for some people, may want to read about it and see some steps, and maybe they're not kinesthetic learners, but they're naturalistic, so they would be interested in it. Or maybe they want to learn from other people, so having that interpersonal communication, and they know that they're more of an introvert, so they have to work on their people skills, but they like to learn from other individuals. So you can see how these relate, and that's a review of what we talked about last time. We also talked about how interpersonal was used in cooperative or collaborative learning, working with other individuals. You have to kind of understand how to listen to other people, how to cooperate, how to be patient with other people, and get things done within a group. That's interpersonal communication. And then you have intrapersonal, knowing oneself. Like if you're an introvert, how can you build on your strengths of being an introvert? How can you build or improve on your weaknesses so that you can function within a group? So knowing oneself is extremely important to work within a group, which would be interpersonal communication. And then we talked about there's things that you can do independently, and if you know that about yourself, that's interpersonal communication. There's things that you need help from teachers or peers, and that's being able to communicate with these people effectively is interpersonal communication or intelligence. And now I want to talk about VARK, so visual, auditory, reading and writing, and kinesthetic, and how it relates to multiple intelligence theory. All it is a simplification of multiple intelligence theory. You can see that musical rhythmic has been taken out, logical mathematical has kind of been taken out of the steps. Naturalistic is out of the process. They're not really talking about intra or interpersonal communication. It just assesses your modes of learning. And these are easily applied to activities in class and to your learning, especially even with lecture-based information. How do you want to see that information when you pay attention to it? So that's what this helps us do, is take environmental stimulus that's coming in from the environment, smell, touch, hearing, taste, and sight. And if we pay attention to it, then we can get it over into short-term memory. This is going to tie into information processing later in the semester. So understanding your primary modes of learning, or the intelligences that you just naturally have to take in new information, helps you be an efficient learner by paying attention to it. Yes, I can pay attention to new information by reading and writing, but it's going to take me longer to get that information from short-term memory over into long-term memory. But if I focus on the modes that I'm most efficient at, being visual, kinesthetic, and even auditory instruction, that's going to help me get that information in faster. And so now you can see the connection between visual and spatial from multiple intelligence theory. Auditory and reading and writing are kind of lumped up here in verbal linguistic. That's where those came from. And then kinesthetic is here at bodily kinesthetic. And so early in the semester, I would have had you do a VARK inventory where you would have assessed this. For me, I kind of graphed it out in your schedule, and you'll see there was a huge spike in visual information on the on the number that was recorded for visual learning and kinesthetic for me. Those were the two biggest spikes on my bar graph. And then auditory behind that. But reading and writing, not so great. Right? That was my lowest. That's the last thing I would want to go to. I would want to process that information visually, kinesthetically, listen to some instruction about it, and the last thing I'm going to go to is reading and writing about it. Mainly because that's not my primary mode. And for me to really read about something, especially if it's skill-based, I need to see it first and perform it for the reading to even make sense. And for me to process that in writing, if I haven't done it, I'm going to have a really hard time visualizing what I'm writing about. And if I never actually perform the skill, I'm going to have a really difficult time breaking down the steps that are important for it. What I want you to talk about when it comes to learning styles, this activity, I'm going to use a primitive fire example. Even if this is not a class where we're using primitive fire skills, it'll help you understand what to make your video about. I want you to talk about what were the most important modes of learning when doing this activity. Was it the visual information? Was it actually performing the skill? Did you need some sort of auditory description? Would your group or the majority of your group members prefer to read and write about it first and then perform the skill? What modes of learning and what weight would you put to each element of the skill? So how much weight would you put to visual learning to learn the skill? How much weight would you put on kinesthetic learning? Which one was most important if you had to put these into a category and actually draw them out in a bar graph? So that's what I want you to talk about for the activity. I'm going to show you how to tie a knot. And we're going to do a clove hitch because it's going to be used, if this is a primitive fire class, that would be the activity. And that is a skill that we're going to continue to use all through the semester. You're going to be surprised at how often we used it. So last class I taught you how to make cordage. Now we're going to take that cordage and learn how to tie a knot. And what's most important? Visual information, kinesthetic information, a combination of those two? Or is it visual, auditory, kinesthetic? Do you need all three? Or is reading and writing important? That's what you're going to talk about when you film the activity or when you edit the video of the activity. Yes, you're still going to show your attempt at the activity itself of actually tying the knot, but what you're going to talk about, what you're going to write about if you're creating subtitles, is what modes of learning are most important. Remember, the theory or the theoretical concept that we talk about in the week, that should be the main emphasis of these videos and what you write about in your discussions.